Thank you for joining me, everyone. What I would like you to all do is, just before we start, take a moment and sit back in your seats. Actually, if everyone would like to close their eyes for a second. I normally like to do an inhalation and an exhalation. So we could breathe in. Actually, I like to do for 5 breaths, so closing our eyes and inhaling for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and exhaling for 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. So what I would like you to do in your minds is take yourself back to a place where you felt super inspired, super creative, you felt super connected to the people around you, you felt super alive and wanting to do your best kind of work, super engaged, super inspired. So do like a 360 in your mind. Have a look at the place around you, the colors, the textures, the people, the environment. Really have this place in your mind. And then when you're ready, you're welcome to open your eyes and meet me back here. I mean, if anyone wants to write in the chat about this place, you're more than welcome. But what I would really like you to do is, when we go through this session on biophilic design, keep in mind this particular place so we can kind of draw a reference to it and see if any of the points that I'm talking about have any relevance to what we really experienced. So what we're going to do today is maybe think back to a time when you were working in a certain place, you felt super engaged, super productive. You left at the end of the day and you were like, okay, I worked super well, but I just couldn't quite put my finger on what it was and what made me feel so engaged and so connected. Have a little think. Because what we're going to do today is really use the framework of biophilic design to give context and a conscious and deliberate framework, in a way, to design our environments that support what we're doing for our health and our productivity and our sense of well-being, so that we can really design our environments with a much more deliberate manner to support everything we might be doing in yoga and in reading certain books and things like that. So biophilic design is very much about using our environment from an external perspective with like a clear, conscious manner so that we can support what we're trying to do. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm just going to go to the slide. So I'm going to introduce the framework that's developed by Stephen Keller. There are many different frameworks, but I find his the most concise and the most, I guess, deliberate to bring into our spaces. I'm going to really try and give an understanding of what biophilic design is, why it's so important, so the benefits around health, well-being and productivity, the financial benefits of biophilic design, and also why it's been called the missing link in sustainable design as well. Then I'm going to present to you a framework of bringing biophilic design into your spaces, so through direct manners and indirect ways, and also by really understanding what it is to have a strong sense of place. And also I'm going to be looking at, so there was a body of work developed by Terra Green in 2014, and that really goes into the science behind each of the different elements that we're talking about, so we can see why these elements have such significance in our spaces. And then also I'm going to probably run it in about 4 sections, and if there's any questions, just let me know at the end of each section and we'll just check that we're all on the same point. Cool. So what is biophilic design? Just as a butterfly is very much influenced by the time that it spends in its cocoon, the way that it experiences life in our world, the way that our ancestors experienced life throughout evolutionary history very much influences now how we perceive beauty and harmony in our modern built environment. So why is this so important? Certain colors, certain textures, certain geographic organizations, certain patterns were so instrumental to how our species was able to survive and thrive that what happened was these specific elements of nature became encoded into our DNA. So when we bring these elements of nature into our environments, they have a profound effect on the cognitive, psychological, and physiological functionings of our body. We feel a lot more relaxed. We really lower our stress levels. We feel a lot calmer, which then allows, so we have an innate base level of safety, security, and comfort, which then allows us to have a lot more energy directed to our immune functioning and to our cognitive abilities, which allows enhanced concentration and productivity and obviously overall health and well-being. So that's really, really key. So Terrapin Green did this study back in 2012, which was about the economics of biophilic design. And this was way before all the different attention-grabbing devices are as prominent as they are now. So they calculated that lost energy costs were 112 times greater than lost productivity costs in the workplace, yeah? And by using one or two elements of biophilic design, employers could save on average, so actually I think this was specifically with a view to nature, employers could save $2,000 per person per year. So this was in I think it was 2010, 2008, 2010, 2012, that kind of period they did the study on. Also, which was super interesting, they calculated that 10% of all employee absences could be directly attributed to architecture with no connection to nature. So that's incredible. And also, which was amazing, they calculated that the healthcare sector could save $93 million per year by implementing one or two elements of biophilic design, so for example, light or vegetation, just so that patients were able to heal even half a day earlier. So that is incredible how even a slight tweak in productivity and a slight boost in immune functioning, which allows people to heal that much earlier, really changes, financially it has a massive impact. So that's really, really key. The third point, which for me is really important, and I know for Fora as well because of what they're doing around sustainability, the premise of biophilic design is this: until we feel innately safe, secure, and comfortable, we're not going to have the emotional connection to keep our buildings, our designs, our architecture, our interiors intact in the long run, yeah? So whereas low-impact design is about creating an environment for humans as biological creatures, low-impact design is about creating an environment for humans where we bring down the impact on the planet. Biophilic design is about creating an environment for humans as biological creatures. But the question is, this is actually, there's a beautiful quote, and this for me kind of sums up a lot about what biophilic design is. If we're building, beautiful, state-of-the-art, sustainable buildings with low technology, with low impact technology, and super high, content in solar panels and things like that. If we don't have this connection for humans as biological creatures, how do we know and how can we ensure that these structures, these designs, these environments are going to be intact 30, 40, 50 years from now? And this quote which I read, which I love, from the Lean Startup, which is the big question of our time, is not can it be built, but should it be built? And for me, biophilic design is very much about that. Yes, we can bring all these low-impact designs and super state-of-the-art technology into our lives, but if we're not providing the emotional impetus for human beings to keep what we have intact, then how sustainable is what we're bringing into the environment? Because obviously sustainability isn't about just having state-of-the-art, low-impact technology. It's about really having the emotional impetus to keep what we have intact. So those are the three really main benefits and main points around biophilic design. If there's any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or to even jump on if anyone wants to ask anything. Cool. So, just to recap, well, or maybe to make it clear, biophilia is our inherent ability to connect with the natural world as we've evolved throughout history. Biophilic design is designing our modern built environment with this innate connection in mind. Yeah? So Stephen Keller, as I mentioned, this is the framework that I find the most concise. He's considered the forefather of biophilic design. He is a very inspirational human being who unfortunately died in 2018. He identifies some principles which are very much what we need to enhance any biophilic appeal of any design space setting. So the first is that biophilic design enhances our health, our well-being, and our productivity. If it doesn't, it's not really biophilic. That's the goal, and that's what's so important. Number two is that biophilic design is very much about creating strong emotional attachments. If we're not connected to our spaces, our designs, even our clothing, our graphics, our landscapes, then that's not, again, biophilic. Emotional connection is really key. Community I'll talk about in a minute. Learning and repetition. So biophilia is an innate tendency. It's something that's inside of us, but needs like adequate learning and a sense of like social engagement to become fully functional. So learning about biophilic design is a way that it's going to like enhance how well we feel in any space and how much we reap the benefits of nature. Just having, you know, so for example, if there was a beautiful green wall outside here in Fora that it wasn't really accessible, and maybe I walked past it once every 2 months, that's not going to do much for our health, well-being, and productivity. From a biophilic perspective, it has to be very much a daily engagement. Again, if, you know, I used to go running on the marshes once every 2 months. Again, that's not very much in terms of our health and our productivity. It's about a sustained relationship. So learning and repetition is really key. Authentic. So biophilic design is about creating an authentic connection to nature, either representationally or through symbolically. But the further we move away from this like baseline of natural connection, the less biophilic any design, any space, any setting is going to be, any work environment. Adaptable, I'll talk about in a moment. Wholeness in a moment. So sustainability in a moment. Values of biophilia. So Stephen Keller often talks about the values of biophilia, which are ways that throughout history we have attributed what he described as meaning and benefit from nature. So for example, how, you know, back in the day, the way that we were able to learn to reason and develop our cognitive capacities was in the natural world. So intellectual development became a very strong value of nature. Also how we use nature for, how we're attracted to nature. So that helped develop feelings of symmetry and harmony and emotional connection. We employed the image of nature to enhance our spiritual capacity, our capacities to symbolize nature and to communicate with other people, to have a sense of creativity and a sense of imagination. We also were very much using nature for a sense of reverence, which helped develop our ability to be spiritual and have a sense of confidence and meaning. We harness the gifts of nature. We also use nature for affectionate manners. So when we're designing, the aim of any design from a biophilic perspective is to use these values of nature as a design objective. So we have symbolism, spirituality, intellectual development, affection, attraction, harnessing the gifts of nature, these are very much what we want to look at as design objectives. And there's going to be a PDF that I'm sending Fora, which has everything written down. So it's going to be very clear if, it's a lot to remember. So those are the values that we want to think about when we're designing any space. How can we make it so that we're attracted to it? How can we be affectionate towards our spaces? How can we use these innate values of nature to enhance the biophilic appeal of any space? So community. We'll do wholeness. Have a think right now, just have a look at this image and see if you know where it is. So throughout evolutionary history, the way that we were able to orient ourselves in our space was by understanding how the integrated and interrelated parts of any setting fit into the overall whole. And Tuscany is an amazing example because there really is a sense of wholeness and a sense of movement. So, and actually I think Tuscany is considered one of the most biophilic places on earth, which is, incredible because I think it's also one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. So this sense of wholeness can really be seen in this, an example here, as you have the colors of the landscape reflecting in the colors of the windows. You have the colors of the buildings on the rooftops reflected in the colors in the streets. So there is a sense of when you're in one little alleyway, the whole experience is almost as an entity. There's a sense of wholeness and connectedness, which is key. So wholeness is a very, very important principle. Community. So a question for you guys. You're standing in Shoreditch Station, and I invite you for a coffee. So we can choose. I'm in my studio in Whitechapel. You can come and meet me either in the city or in Columbia Road. Where would you want to go? You don't have to answer, just think about it. So I hope everyone, I guess the right answer would be Columbia Road. So, and that's what everyone seems to say. Throughout history, throughout evolutionary history, when we had an understanding of the people around us and the environment, we fared a lot better. So being territorial became an evolutionary advantage, actually. So it's no coincidence that we're very much attracted to places that have a sense of place and a sense of community. In the city, where you have what's called the industrial style of architecture, you have a building that you could pick up and you could put it in London, in Tokyo, in Hong Kong, in Paris, and it's not very much connected to place. From a biophilic perspective, we really need to think about the place and designing our spaces, our environments, with a strong connection to being embodied in where we are. And it's interesting because also Fora, I think they're doing this really well. They have a lot of local artwork and they're very much connected to the local place and the local buildings by embodying that in their designs as well. So they've really got this. So community is key. Another East London image, because that's where we are. Okay, we spoke about authentic, transitional spaces. These principles that I'm talking about, they essentially, what biophilic design is saying is that we all have our own design tastes and styles, but what fundamentally makes us feel safe, secure, and connected is bound by biology. Yeah? So, these are principles that can be applied to our designs. They can be applied to interiors. They can be applied to business practices. They can be applied to hallways, alleyways. They're very much universal and they're adaptable so that we can use these as a basis to enhance the biophilic experience of anything of any endeavor. Sustainability as well. So biophilic design, yes, is about creating for spaces for humans as biological creatures, but also about bringing our impact on the environment down. And if we look, so this is the Park Güell in Barcelona. If we look at like some really actually quite biophilic designs and structures, they embody a lot of quite famous and quite well-regarded structures. They embody a lot of biophilic principles, and Gaudi is, an example of in every corner he used bits of mosaic from a mosaic factory, bits of glass from an old glass factory. So sustainability is really, really quite, important, and also is something that we're very much drawn to. So those principles, before I move on, just have a think now. Maybe you just want to think about where you work or where you are at the moment, and have a think about any of these principles and see if it's something that applies, or if you have any ideas about how they could fit into your work environment. So that is a sense of wholeness, connecting to the community, sustainability, being emotionally connected to our environments, our spaces, authentic, so having an authentic representation of nature, the values of biophilia, so creating spaces that are attractive, that draw us affectionately, that symbolize nature, and also this sense of learning and repetition. Cool, so before I move on, there's a couple of questions. I just want to see if I can't. Okay. Okay, so there was just a question which is, I also agree with this. Cool, so I'm going to carry on. So those are the principles of biophilic design. Just have a think about how they fit, if any of them connect to your specific environment before I move on. So what we're going to do is talk about practically how we can bring these elements of biophilic design into our spaces, yeah? So we've got direct means, for example, light and plants and water. We're going to talk about indirect means as well, which are more about natural patterns and processes. And then an experience, like what it means to have a really strong experience of space and place. Cool. When we go through as well, there's this, so this table's been developed by Terra Green in 2014, and it really goes into the science of each of the different elements of nature. And what it does on our body, so in terms of how these different elements reduce our stress, how they're particularly impactful for cognitive performance, and how they enhance our mood and our emotion and things like that. So we'll start with a visual connection to nature, so plants. Actually, when people think about biophilic design, they think mainly plants, but this is just one element. Cool. So plants. I'll just take some water. Visual connection to nature lowers our blood pressure and our heart rate, which is obviously really important for creating a space where we want to feel less stressed. It improves our mental engagement, which enhances our cognitive performance, and is a visual, and is something that we are very much attracted to, which enhances our mood and our preference. Each of the studies is going to be in the PDF that I'll send to Jordan, so you can really have a little look at each particular element to go into it a little bit deeper. Cool, so plants. What I would like you guys to do again, actually, is maybe just where you're sitting, if you want to close your eyes for a moment, have a think. Just imagine you're sitting in your home, or on your desk, wherever you're working, and behind you are a whole load of plants that I have brought from Thailand. So a whole load of orchids and palm trees. Maybe palm trees, plants from the other side of the world. And then you have a couple of cactuses, which are on a windowsill outside, but you can't open the window and you can't access them. And then you have a green wall outside your door, but again, the door's locked and you can't go there. You also have like a whole load of plants behind, but actually they're not looked after, they're dying, and yeah. And then you have like one planter in the side on its own. How do you feel? Just have a think about it. So from a biophilic perspective, what's really important if we're looking to bring plants into our spaces is, number one, it has to be accessible. Again, having a green wall outside that people can see but they can't access and there's no connection, that's not going to do much from a biophilic perspective. That's not going to enhance our health and our well-being. So accessibility is really key. Also local. Again, having a whole load of plants that are from halfway across the world isn't embodying a lot of the biophilic principles of community and sustainability. Biophilia is love of all that's living, yeah, and connecting to our local environment. So local plants from a biophilic perspective is really, really important to support the local gardeners and the local, horticulture and everything that's around us. That's really key. Also, plants need to be, from a biophilic perspective, well maintained and looked after. If you have a couple of plants that aren't, you're not around enough to water them and they die and they're not looking, full of life and vitality, again, from a biophilic perspective, that's not going to do much. And in fact, actually, it's better to use other methods of bringing nature into the spaces than having plants. Stephen Keller also talks quite a lot about the isolated planter, which is you see in, airports, just one tree or whatever. From a biophilic perspective, that's not going to really do much because it's too much about the exploitation, which is a value of how we've harnessed nature, but it's a bit imbalanced. So the plants have to be also connected to the whole. And I love this, even though this isn't local to us in the UK, this is a building in LA where it has a really nice example of how the plants have very much been weaved into the building and is connected to the overall whole. And you can see here the colors of the bark is reflected in the colors of the buildings. And it's part of the whole existence where you experience it as one kind of entity as opposed to something that is just there on its own. Have I missed anything about plants? So yeah, well looked after, really accessible, part of our everyday experience. Also, actually, if you have a whole load of plants that aren't connected to the rest of the design of the space, again, that's not really biophilic. They have to be connected and a sense of linking from the whole environment. This is in, where's this? This is in Singapore. So Singapore has become like one of the pioneers in like biophilic and green cities, which is incredible, and they're doing loads of things around health and healing gardens and things like that, which, but as long as, the plants are local and they connect to place and they have a sense of community, that's going to really enhance the biophilic appeal of anything. So plants. Okay, light. Again, maybe just think about where you're sitting and imagine, working at your desk without any windows. How do you feel? Hopefully the answer is not great. So have a think about why light is so important, or why you think light is so important. Why maybe when you're going to look at a new office, you're like, it's just really important that I have adequate light, and maybe you can't quite put your finger on why it's so key. Have a think. So the way that we were able to orient ourselves in the day was by understanding how light moved throughout the sky, yeah? So when we have an innate understanding, this is before human beings lived in cities, we were able to orient ourselves by understanding how the light moved throughout the sky. So when we have this sense of innate understanding of this passage of time and this movement, as we see in the studies, it has a positive impact on our circadian system functioning, which does it kind of provides us a base level of safety, which very much reduces our stress. So, and actually it's interesting because often in my design practice, I create paintings with a lot of mosaic and mirror, and the light is constantly reflecting from the windows onto the buildings, and then onto the glass, and then making patterns on the walls. And actually, everyone's like, oh, the paintings are life-affirming. They are very much. We love the mirror and the way the light moves. But I know now that it's this constant moving of time throughout the day, and this like understanding how time is being changing, that provides this sense of like connection. So light is key from that perspective. Also, actually, so I don't know if you guys have been to the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, which is very much the place that I felt the most inspired when I close my eyes and, and think of this creative environment. Walking into the Sagrada Familia, you know exactly what time it is, just how the light is reflected off the colored glass and into the buildings. So Gaudi really knew this intuitively, like this sense of being embodied in the time of day. Colored glass is a great way to do this, mirrored glass as well, filtered glass, filtered light, looking at diffuse light, looking at light pools as well, warm light. This is all the Sagrada Familia. This was a study in a building in Massachusetts where the one biophilic element they used was light, and you can see how different patterns could be reflected in little light mobiles. So the people that worked there had all day the sense of change and the sense of movement. And I think they did a whole study, and I think they reported that 22% increase in worker productivity and like 20% increase in worker morale after this renovation. So that's really like amazing. Light. Actually, just have a think right now as well. You can look around and look at your space and have a think, oh yeah, would it be good to put a few more mirrors there, or have some glass mobiles, or have light glass, light patterns. Incidentally, there was a study, this is in Terrapin Green in the Economics of Biophilic Design, that they calculated after putting windows in a shopping centre which didn't have any windows, sales went up by 40%, which is like incredible. And I think they also calculated that school children progressed 20 to 26% faster when learning in daylit environments. So light. Also looking at shadowed light as well, so like light and dark. That's a biophilic technique we can use. And again, this is in Fora, but from a biophilic perspective, if we're going to have a high stress meeting or have a something that is very like, maybe we need to bring the stress levels down a little bit from a biophilic perspective, maybe go and have it in a place where we've got this sense of movement and the sense of passage of time, and we have like different patterns and different light situations. Water. The presence of water reduces our stress level, increases our feelings of tranquility, lowers our heart rate, and enhances our blood pressure. It's also great for our cognitive performance because it improves our concentration and our memory, and enhances our perception and psychological responsiveness. There's certain elements from a biophilic perspective of water that's super important, evolutionary-wise. Back in the day, the way we were able to drink was when we had water from like a flowing river or a clear pond. So even now, we're attracted to flowing rivers and clear ponds. This is Lloyd Wright in Massachusetts, and he's very much into, his designs were very much all integrated into waterfalls. And actually, if we were looking at biophilic sounds, then yeah, like flowing rivers is something that we'd want. When we have clear water with different light patterns, that means that water's more drinkable. So we're connected to water that has that sense of light reflecting off it. And again, if we can't necessarily if we can't necessarily bring water into our environments, which is quite difficult, I know, in a place like Fora, and we're working, images of water are quite good as well, but as long as they're, a clear pond or a clear water and a flowing river, that's from a biophilic perspective is going to enhance the sense of innate connection. Okay, I'm going to answer these questions in a minute about light. So what I'm going to do at the end of this session, Fora, and Jordan in particular, has all these points that are written in like a cheat sheet type thing with links to the studies that I'm referencing and links to the table where you can have a look at each of the different elements around light and the studies that were around our environments. And I'll get to the question about light in a second. Okay, so there's certain environments that are super key from a biophilic perspective. Edges of forests are one. Have a think as to why we like edges of forests. So in edges of forests, human beings were able to see a long distance from a safe and secure place. And that's essentially how it became so evolutionary involved. So biophilic views of forests. Also savannas are quite key as well. We, human beings, stood upright in the savanna, and that park-like setting, so savanna-like analogues, are something that we're very much connected to. Also, views, if we, it's from a biophilic perspective, yeah, we want to place our desk next to a view to nature, but if that's not possible, we can go and look for 20 feet for 20 seconds, and that will enhance what's called our directed attention, which is what we need to concentrate so that we can restore our concentration. So 20 feet for 20 seconds, and I think Fora has lots of opportunities for like high views. So those are direct method. Oh, okay. And there's this study by Judith Herwergen, and she goes into design, productivity, and well-being. And what she talks, and this is also in the PDF at the end, that when we're building environments that contain the essential features of preferred natural settings will be more supportive of human well-being and performance than environments lacking these features. So essentially, when we're designing from the human connection to nature, the more we incorporate these elements, the most connected we're going, and the more it's going to enhance, our sense of concentration and our well-being. Okay, I'm going to just answer the question. Light communicates the transition of day, circadian system, to direction. Light. So what I would say about light is that we need to use whatever tools we have to help give this sense of movement. So whether that's through patterns, or whether that's through shadow, or whether that's through utilizing different shapes, or placing the window strategically, we need to be able to have this sense of movement through the day to regulate our circadian system. And incidentally, morning light is yellow, afternoon light is blue, and early evening light is red. So we can look at these colors as well to work with our spaces. So those are in more direct ways. So we have like water, plants, light, certain views, animals I didn't quite touch on, and light, color. So have a think as to why color is so important from an evolutionary perspective. Maybe you know. So most edible fruits came with bright flowering plants. So even now we're very much attracted to flower colors as we're daytime creatures, and we really honed our ability to see. So from a biophilic perspective, natural colours, colours of the sun, colours of the sea, colours of the earth, colours of clear water. And I know Fora is really good actually at bringing natural colours into their spaces. And I had a chat with their interior designers. They're very much about bringing earthy, natural colours in, floral colours. And actually, it's interesting because from a design perspective, when I have taken the colours and made them less authentic, they've never been as well received. I've noticed that when the colours are as close to the natural tones, that's very much, there's much more emotional connection. So even if you're designing a graphic, or you're painting your walls, or you're painting designing a new room in Fora, for example, that is keeping the colours as close to the natural tones is going to enhance the biophilic appeal. This is an example of the dome of music, which is very much cultivates this biophilic value of sustainability, where it's an amazing example of biophilic colours. So the sun. Okay, shape. So we spoke about forests. What kinds of biophilic shapes? We have long, tall shapes, arches, domes, forest-like structures. I love this example of St. Paul's because you can see, the tree-like columns here, circles, domes, spirals, shapes that don't define hard edges or lines. So yeah, like hard angles and lines. And actually, you can see here lots of the shapes of the buildings are reflected in the trees and things like that. So these are biophilic shapes. And maybe you can think about, I know when I looked online at Fora, there was quite a lot of egg-like shapes, egg-like forms, shapes of trees. Again, nothing in the natural world was really straight, all movement. And actually back to Sagrada Familia, again, it is like a forest. Walking in there, you feel like you're in the middle of some beautiful forest. And Gaudi very much, he knew this. He knew this sense of human connection to these tree-like forms. An example of using organic-like shapes and circles at Fora. So they're intuitively, Fora really on this actually. They really understand how to use these biophilic principles in their designs, maybe without even knowing what they were doing. It's like from a biophilic perspective, they're really on it. The graphic for this image, for this talk, which is very much about organic shapes and also interacting with our environment. Again, I'm obviously on a Gaudi thing today, but movement, using these organic shapes in our designs, in our structures. So material connection to nature. I've got quite a lot, we've got to keep going. So material connection to nature. How can we bring materials into our environment? Materials reduce our blood pressure, they enhance our creative performance, which is obviously really important for cognitive performance. And there's something that we're very much connected to, which enhance our mood. How can we do this? We can bring sand, wood, bark. We can have sheepskins. We can have linen placemats. This is an example of a building that uses a lot of hemp and a lot of wood. What's interesting, though, is to think, okay, I need to sit down and be super focused, so I'm going to find a place in Fora that has a lot of natural materials, or bring in this environment because I need to think creatively for 2 hours. Using this knowledge of how materials reflect our ability to concentrate can really help cultivate a sense of focus, attention. Also mystery as well. In the natural world, nothing was ever as it seems. There was always a sense of surprise and boundaries blurred. And from a biophilic perspective, yes, we really like the sense of mystery. It induces a pleasure response and is something that enhances our mood and our preference. So we have like Central Park in America, and that has a sense of boundaries. Nothing's quite clear. Again, different artworks. I like this because it's not quite revealed. So you can think, in your marketing or in your designs, how can I give a sense of mystery, a sense of boundary? information richness as well in the natural world. That was how we developed a sense of cognitive development. So being able to look and discover and search and using materials to have a sense of depth. An example of a painting that I created, which was with the intention for people to be able to really have this sense of exploration and discovery visually, to reset this sense of cognitive development and intellectual development. So connection to natural systems as well. This is something that we're very much connected to because it is part of our life processes, yeah? So natural processes enhance our health and they shift our perception of our environment so we're embodied in our space. So I always wondered how certain paintings were very much like why people were like, oh, I love the gold leaf. And now I realize it's this sense of death and decay and growth and effervescence, which is very much a natural process, which is what we're attracted to. So again, thinking how can we use maybe weathered plant pots or wallpaper that has a sense of growth and like sense of decay, or weathered gates, things like that. Again, a sense of change. And it's interesting, maybe it's as simply as putting like a spring flowers on the desk, or a scent of autumn leaves, to just have this innate reminder of this sense of change. Again, images. There's lots of studies about how images of nature enhance our ability to concentrate and reduce our stress levels. So images of nature can be a great way if we're not practically able to bring plants into our environment. Biomorphic forms as well. So have a think if you know what biomorphic and biomimicry is. Biomorphic is when we take, so biomimicry is when we take a form for its function, and so people who use like copy streamline animals for their sense of speed. And so that's biomimicry, and biomorphic is when we create something and it accidentally looks like a natural shape. And the Sydney Opera House is an example of this. So it didn't intend to look like a bird or a butterfly, that's an accident. And Stephen Keller says as well that biomorphic design has been linked to our inherent human affinity for natural forms that when successfully expressed can enhance human psychological and mental well-being. So biomorphic forms is a great way to bring this connection to nature into our spaces. Fractals as well, mathematical geometries. There's a lot of studies in the economics of biophilia about how fractals enhance our neural and parasympathetic nervous system, so systems, which is obviously what we need to relax and to concentrate, and to slow down our stress levels. And the study, so this particular study concluded that environments with many stimuli and patterns, the patterns that are most likely to hold our attention and induce a relaxed response are fractal patterns commonly found in nature. So, fractals are, I'll explain in a second, this is spirals and shells, but fractals are patterns that are self-similar, so like one element of a leaf is the same as the whole. You can zoom in on this mountain here and the image will be exactly the same as what it is in a bigger form. So fractals, and I was creating a painting for a client where I was trying to bring this idea of a river and a moving water and fractal images into a design. Because obviously I love this idea of people being able to calm their nervous system and to have like this direct effect on our cognitive functioning by the artwork that's around. So fractals are a great way. Again, it's interesting to see places like Notre Dame. They have these buildings that we're so connected to embody so many of these biophilic principles and practices, and fractals are very much abundant in the architecture here. Okay, so those were indirect methods. We spoke about fractals, information richness, the sense of change. We can use images of nature, color, shape. Any questions? Issues impending biophilic design, why it's not commonplace today. I'll talk about this in a moment. So the last kind of section that I want to touch on is what it means to create a strong sense of place. And Venice is a great example. We're going to use Venice as an example to see what it means to be connected to our environment. So how can we create a strong sense of place? Well, we can be connected to the local history, the local culture, the local geography, the local ecology. We can use the colors from the environment and the geography into the design of the place. Prospect and refuge is really important as well, and that creates a strong sense of place. Have a think about if you know what prospect and refuge is. So human beings, we felt safer when we could see a long distance from a safe and secure place. So that's really key. Also, transitional spaces, looking at our hallways, looking at our doors, looking at our windows, looking at our business transitions from one environment to the next. Also mobility as well. We like bounded spaces, spaces that are clear and spaces that are focused, and this is where we work, this is where we eat. It's all very, very clear. This sense of prospect and refuge, which is in Istanbul, again, feeling safe and secure from a small place where we can see long distance. And prospect reduces our stress, because obviously we can see our prey. It reduces our boredom and irritation and fatigue, and improves our comfort and our perceived safety. Refuge is also very important because it improves our concentration and attention and perception of safety as well. So prospect and refuge combined, and I think in Fora there's loads of opportunities where you can see from a long distance from a safe and secure place. Again, if you're thinking about, high stress meetings or wanting to really restore your concentration and focus, you can go to a place where you have this sense of prospect and refuge. An example of how back in the day that was how we were able to orient ourselves in time, was by having this understanding of being able to see a long distance. Again, Fora is great for this. You have the reading rooms, which are tucked away and have a sense of security. So again, focus time where you need to work or you need to concentrate. That would be a great time to go to the reading room. Clear function. Yeah, so I'm just going to answer this question because it's very interesting. The sense of bounded spaces. In nature, everything was very clear. So how can we use this idea to bounded spaces? For example, maybe it's as simple as when we finish work, having a boundary and not talking about work when we leave. Or, having a very, very clear office space where everything is in order, because from a biophilic perspective, that's something that we feel innately connected to. Again, this sense of, I know that the interior designers told me that there's a lot of meditation pods and people are attracted towards that in Fora. So again, if we need a time to have sustained concentration and deep focus, the meditation pods are a great way to bring this sense of refuge into our environments. Transitional spaces as well. It is really interesting for me to see, how this is a Bonnard, different artists embody so many of these principles. Windows, doors. Transitional spaces, movement from one place to another. And I find it so interesting now, having studied biophilic design for a long time. I see all the time people posting pictures of places that they like, and this was on Fora. There was on the Instagram about a view, enjoying the views from one of the roof terraces, which is, from a very biophilic perspective, there's no accident that that's a place that we enjoy and that we feel connected to, because this innate sense of safety that we experience from really being able to see far from a safe and secure place. Just an example, this was the marketing material from Fora, and I was thinking, how can we bring a sense of wholeness into a business process? And I mean, it sounds quite simple, but something as simple as, looking at different, like the presentation, for example, I used the graphic here on the bottom and on the PDF that you'll get. Just whatever we can do to have this sense of wholeness and connectedness is going to enhance the biophilic appeal of any experience that we're going through. So Fora is a great example that embodies, a lot of these biophilic principles. To experience a sense of place. So we spoke about place. We touched on as well in the beginning about integrating the parts to create wholes, this sense of clear boundaries and mobility, transitional spaces, prospect and refuge. Are there any questions about these elements? Cool. So to recap, when we're looking to enhance the biophilic appeal of any space, what do we need to think about? Well, biophilic design enhances our health and our well-being. It allows us to have really strong emotional attachments so that we feel connected to what we're bringing into existence. It's all about affirming the community. Biophilic design isn't a one and done experience, it's about learning. So having a workshop and a lecture on biophilic design is actually a biophilic process. Teaching your clients why you want to use certain colors is a biophilic process. For educating, with their interior designers and their work, the members is a very teaching about plants and horticulture and sustainability. That's very biophilic. Authentic, we want to keep our experience of nature as authentic as possible. A sense of wholeness, connecting to the overall whole. We want to incorporate sustainability wherever we can. And we want to, when we design our environments, our spaces, our designs, have this sense of using these values as a design objective. How can we create spaces, create environments that we feel attracted to, that enhance our affection, that we symbolize nature, that use nature for spiritual means, that have a sense of harnessing the gifts of nature. So those are the main views. Biophilic design. Cool. So what I would like everyone to do is close their eyes, maybe sit back in their chair for a second, close their eyes, maybe take a deep breath, an inhalation and an exhalation. We can do the 5 breaths again. So inhaling for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And exhaling for 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. So in your mind, I'd like you to take yourself back to the place that you felt super inspired and super creative and super connected, and do another look around, like another 360. And just have an idea in the back of your mind, if anything has changed since listening to these points on biophilic design, and see how you experience the place now. And then when you're ready, you're welcome to open your eyes again. So before we finish and I answer some questions, just have a think about if there were 3 things that came up when I was talking that you were like, yeah, this is great. I'm going to use more mirrors. I'm going to be more organized in my compartments of spaces, or I'm going to utilize the transitional spaces a bit more. Just 3, if there are 3 things that resonated, you're more than welcome to write it in the box and in the chat. And otherwise, I think I will let you guys, I'll take questions and let you guys get on with your day. So thank you so much for joining me to talk about biophilic design this morning. So any questions? It feels like biophilic design is based on rationality and compartmentalization of space. So biophilic design is very much intuitive, and is something that we all know, but is not necessarily something that we utilize. So now that we have kind of a scientific framework of biophilic design, we can be a lot more deliberate with our environment so that we can be very conscious about designing our spaces that enhance our health and our well-being. And so all the tables and all the information is going to be in the PDF that you can look at it further. Any other questions, or are we good? And any questions, you can email me as well. I think Fora has my email address.